Hello, how are you all? It's finally over. Let me just adjust the camera. There you go. Now it's time for a rest. It has been a roller coaster. It has really been interesting, amazing. But what is really amazing was the results and how the results actually worked out. Only with our political system could a party that got less votes than Corbyn did in 2019 gain so many seats. They actually got, what did they get? The tally 33.7%, and they got 412 seats. God help us now. But it needs to get worse before it can get better, because people need to see just how dangerous they are. We need this once every generation, where Labour are often the default alternative to the Conservatives. And literally, just as our inflation has got down and we're sort of on the right track in some direction, despite all of the other problems, we're now going to be facing people who intend to just literally bleed the country to death and squander it. And that's out of low turnout in the first place, James. Yes, absolutely. Good evening, David. I hope you are well. Corrupt system, there needs to be a change now. Well, yes, but unfortunately, as I said, it needs to get worse before it can get better. Obviously, as you know from the four musketeers, we've now got the famous five, because following two or three recounts in Basildon, a paper candidate who was drawn in at the last minute with no team, no backup, nothing, was neck and neck. And after three recounts, he won. So now there are five Reform UK candidates, and we got more votes than the Lib Dems, and yet we get five seats, and the Lib Dems get 71. So that demonstrates just how our system works. I assume that there are going to be a few fireworks in Westminster in the future when it all comes back together, and it will be necessary. On that note, just a quick alert: it is now 9:05, and in case you've forgotten, the the working hours of our new Prime Minister. Keir Starmer packed up for the weekend 3 hours ago, so I assume that legally or effectively, or any way that you want to see it, currently Angela Rayner is running the country. So sleep tight tonight. Don't worry. I'm sure she has got everything covered. And this is how it will be every weekend. So when you do finish work on a Friday night and you go out to have a couple of drinks, don't worry about anything. Don't fret, because the country's in good hands, because our Angie's taking care of everything. She's holding the fort. No problem whatsoever. All right, let's go on to the next question. What do we got here? Anthony, a lot of people were swayed by the actor Parker. They were saying they didn't want to vote for a party that with that sort of person in it. They didn't believe me when I tried to defend reform. I know. It wasn't just one, it was several things. We had a few candidates who clearly were planted. There was a girl who stood down 1 or 2 days before the election. She was a last minute candidate, had got in touch with a vacant to inquire about standing for a vacant seat, pleaded her case, said all the right things. She hadn't even met anyone, because she stood and the election was called. And after that, nobody had time to meet anybody. So she'd never actually had anything to do with anyone else. And then all of a sudden, out the blue, 2-3 days before the election, she decides to just, to stand down and throw out accusations against the party and so on and so forth. Think about it. Well over 600 people put together against the clock, really, some of them, not all, but a lot of them. And you get a handful that may or may not have been rogue candidates, genuine rogue candidates, or plant, whichever the case may be. That is nothing compared to the crooks, the charlatans, the sexual offenders, and the perverts in both of the other parties. They have a long list of them, but nothing is mentioned about them. Even through the course of the election, there's been another party who I won't mention because that's a different topic, who had X amount of candidates who were guilty of actual offences, and yet nobody seemed interested in them. As for this guy Parker, Channel 4 have investigated it and they have found no evidence that they did wrong. Think about that for a moment, how ridiculous that is. But anybody with the ability to just look at anything objectively could see through it. All I would say is those who didn't see through it or couldn't see through it didn't want to. And it's not really worth wasting your breath on these people because they will gradually see the light over the next year or two. They're hardly in office, and already we have had hints that they don't have money to do what they want to do. They are laying the foundations to literally conjure up all of the plans that they left out of their manifesto. This was the most misleading written form of trickery in a very, very long time. And think about how they've conducted themselves. They've never really answered anything. The only definitive answers that we have had were we will not increase income tax, national insurance, or VAT. That's all. Even where capital gains is concerned, whether it's capital gains in general or capital gains on private residences, they have not said we categorically rule it out and it will never happen. We've never really gone beyond, we have no plans to do this, to implement increased capital gains tax. We have no plans to implement capital gains on private residences. But we know what happens. They commit themselves and then they rob Peter to pay Paul. Keep also in mind that over the last couple of months, we haven't heard a peep from the unions. Nothing, apart from one union that said they do not back them. All the rest have been conspicuous by their absence. Their silence has been thunderous. They've also kept some of the most offensive of their members fairly quiet, such as Emily Thornberry, Ed Miliband, who is now the net zero minister. You know what he's going to do, don't you? So if you can't afford to buy a newer car, the member for the party who claims to be for the people is going to punish you by making you pay to drive into any city, because they won't resist rolling it out all over the place. I have no doubt, no matter what they say, he will be pushing for that anyway. If it doesn't happen, it's not for the lack of him trying. And just like in London, the only people who have to pay ULIs are people who can't afford to buy a newer car. And as you know, when Sadiq Khan rolled it out to the North Circular and South Circular, he was on the record saying he was disappointed by the revenue it had raised. In other words, he was disappointed that he could not extort more money from people who couldn't really afford to pay it. And then he's extended it to the M25. I believe the official figures are that only 1 in 7 people actually pay it. So now he's resorting to even more dramatic measures. And he has decided that next year electric vehicles will pay congestion charge, which they are currently exempt from. This is not a new tax. Here's the trickery. It is the removal or the ending of a concession. And on what day will this be implemented next year? Well, if you're not aware, it's going to be implemented next year on Christmas Day. Think about that for a moment. Just let that sink in. Okay. What have we got here? No one in particular. Good evening. Any news on missing ballot papers mystery? No. It was chaos. There's lots of people who couldn't actually vote. Some of them actually went to the polls and had problems even at the polls voting. It's absolute chaos. And I really don't understand in this day and age why we actually have ballot papers that are posted out and sent back. It can be open to abuse. We remember what happened up in Rochdale at the by-election, and even though they've tried to be more careful, I just don't understand why it needs to be done that way. If you want to complete your self-assessment, or if you want to apply for a passport, you can log into your .gov account, which I believe is fairly secure with its two-step verifications and so on and so forth. Why can't you just log into that and cast your vote? And on that note, why can we not log into our .gov account and cast a vote on any number of things that affect us nationally, important issues? As I've said before, apart from prior to Brexit, the previous referendum we had was in 1975 when we chose to stay in the common market. That's when they forgot to tell us that we were also agreeing to ever closer union. We never agreed to the Maastricht Treaty. We never agreed to the Lisbon Treaty. We never agreed to the floodgates being opened by Blair. We never agreed to mass immigration. We never agreed to this woke culture. We never agreed to signing up to the UN Global Compact on migration. We never agreed to sign up for net zero. Effectively, we have not had democracy. We should have been able to vote on every one of these issues. And I don't understand why it can't just be done through our .gov account. There shouldn't be any need for this time wasting, this expense, and the chaos of postal votes in this day and age is absolutely ridiculous. Could you explain, please, how PR system would work in this country? After a lot of thought, it still confuses me. Would constituencies have to be scrapped? What I'm going to do, Kerry, is I will prepare PR. Okay, just because I forget. I'll tell you what I will do. In the next 2-3 days, I'll actually prepare a presentation to explain it. I will make sure that I'm completely accurate in how I present it to you, because I know that there can be various forms of it, but I will look into what would be the probable format that we would have in this country. I will put a presentation together about it, and then when I go live, I'll show you the presentation, and I will ensure that I know the facts so that I can answer any questions so that we can understand it. But in reality, if we had PR, we would have had I believe 70 or 80 seats from yesterday's result, and Labour would have had well over 100 to 150 seats less. That's how it would have worked. And the Lib Dems would have been just slightly behind us because they got slightly lower vote, and it would have worked out much more fairly. The problem is this, that no government wants to change the political system that put it in power while it is in power. So no matter what they say, they won't want to change it. However, despite the fact that Keir Starmer does have a large majority, there is a real risk that he will be facing a civil war, because, as I said, we've got the unions who will invariably rear their ugly heads in the near future. We have the expectation that a Labour government will deliver more generous wage rises, for example, to doctors or junior doctors who are demanding 35%. As you may have heard him say in the debate, he said, well, we'll negotiate with them. To which it was pointed out to him that in their manifesto, they have made no allowance in their budget to give junior doctors any pay increase at all. So what does he mean we will negotiate with them? Does he mean we'll make you an offer you can't refuse? Or does he mean that we will concede to a certain degree? We won't give you 35%, but we'll give you 5%, 6%, 10%, 15%, whatever it may be. That 5, 10 or 15% has got to come from somewhere, and it's millions. No allowance for it in their budget. Their plans to raise 1.7 billion from VAT on independent schools has already fallen apart. To be honest, it looks like 100,000 pupils will be pulled out of independent schools by September. And as I understand it, the strike point, that is the point at which they will lose, or it will cost them more than they will gain in VAT, is between 100 to 150,000 pupils, at which point, with every pupil that leaves independent school, that's the VAT on their fees that the government is losing. Add on top of that the cost of educating them in a state school that they wouldn't have had before, which again I believe is £5,000 or £6,000 per year per child. On top of that, you have the salaries and national insurance on the teachers, on all of the ancillary staff. Many of these schools are businesses and do pay tax, etc., etc. Add all that together, and not only will they destroy the independent school system, which is something that they do want because they have nothing but contempt for anything that creates opportunity, unless, of course, it's for themselves, but they won't be any better off financially. So once again, the question remains, where will the money come from? That remains to be seen. But I have no doubt that Rachel Reeves is preparing her list of excuses, justifications, and reasons and persons or situations to blame for decisions she will announce on where they are going to tax people. More than likely, they'll tax cars, they'll tax fuel. There's a very high probability that green levies will move from electricity to gas, making gas much, much more expensive to try and push you to have a heat pump. But what they don't tell most people is that you can't just install a heat pump. For most properties, they are completely useless. If you're going to have any chance of being remotely warm with a heat pump, the first thing you need to do is insulate, and insulate seriously. Replace your radiators with much larger radiators, preferably underfloor heating, because the flow temperature is much lower and the heat won't travel as far across a room. So if you have a decent sized room in your house and you've got one big radiator, it won't warm the other side of the room with a heat pump, because with the temperature being much lower, by the time that heat works its way across the room, it will have cooled down, so it won't work efficiently. And to do all of this work will probably cost you more than the cost of installing the heat pump. Then there's the other factor that they don't tell you. Throughout the country, there are thousands and thousands of complaints being dealt with by local authorities because you put a heat pump downstairs, outside. If you live in a two-bedder and it's literally 2 meters away from your next door and their bedroom's at the back, and you're a little bit of a night owl and that thing kicks in at 12, 1 in the morning, it will disturb people. And anything that is motorized with a fan invariably gets louder and louder as it gets older. It's just how they work. And no matter what anybody says to defend them, nothing that has a bearing does not get louder over time. It's just that in this country we're not really used to these types of things because we don't, as a matter of course, have air conditioning to realize just how noisy they can be. What was the next? What have we got here then? Ink pens in booths and get rid of pencils. They are too easy to rub out. I do understand. I do think, though, in all fairness, once ballots do get to the counting centre, they are monitored constantly. Realistically, for people's peace of mind, I agree. It should be pens, not pencils. But from what I saw last night, it would be very, very difficult for anybody to make any changes. And if anybody were to try and make any changes, it would be to literally a handful, not hundreds. And that's assuming that if they use the rubber to eraser to move, mark across somewhere else, when they scrutinise them, they would see that there was a mark there that's been rubbed out, and that ballot paper would more than likely be void. But yes, I do agree. It should really be pens. I don't see why they have pencils. System ridiculous and unfair. Scared about the globalist government plans. Oh, you mean like them signing us up to the WHO? I've forgotten what it's called. Common Health Agreement, whatever it is, which basically allows the WHO to declare a pandemic and order a lockdown in our country and seize a portion of our medical supplies. I personally don't agree with any individual or body or organization out of this country being able to influence or decide anything that happens in this country. Our borders, our laws, our choice. That's how it should be. But unfortunately, there's a large element of our population who, for some ridiculous reason, want our country to be governed by somebody else. I just don't understand it. And if they don't get their way, then they kick off that it's undemocratic, but they want to create a UK that is not democratic because it will be dictated by another country or person or organisation. And I actually don't trust any of them. Channel 4 boycotted in my house, as well as several newspapers. I can completely understand that. And yes, definitely they should go. We know the type of people they have on Channel 4. We know the type of people that they have on BBC. In fact, I think there's a presenter on each one who are related. Or is that me just using my customary inflammatory language again? I don't know about that. Did anyone see Sturgeon's face on ITV? I tried to avoid looking at her face, but I think that the reign of the SNP has come to an end. It's basically drowned in its own venom, hasn't it? What went on in counting in Birmingham was a disgrace, seeing terrorist songs while votes were being counted. Unfortunately, this is something we're seeing more and more of, and I believe that that will only get worse. And if we have leaders who allow that, then effectively they're giving them permission to insult us and to offend us in our own country, and I think that's wrong. Singing, not seeing. Net zero, my God, that is going to be a serious problem. It is a catastrophe that governments, organizations, and the people behind the people have jumped on to dictate to everyone, to tax everyone, and to control everyone. but my biggest concern is the loss of our farmland. We hardly produce enough food as it is, less than 50%. We need to get to 75% or more to have a chance of not starving should we, the unforeseen happen, the unthinkable that we're in a conflict, and hopefully not. But in that event, we would starve with the amount of food that we produce. And yet we're losing thousands and thousands of acres every month now. It's accelerating. And thanks to Boris, who signed this agreement, 30% of our farming land being set aside to plant flowers on and be left there for nature. The National Trust, which owns lots of land, is throwing farmers off so that they can plant things and flowers and so on the land instead of farmers growing food. Farmers give life. Why would anybody support anything that reduces the amount of food we produce? Why would anybody produce anything that controls that can control our food supply? It almost feels like The Omen Part 4 to me. It feels very, very infernal. We are the carbon. Yes, you are, and Ed Miliband will tax you for it. He will tax you for walking down the street and breathing. And when he gets together with his good friend, Mr. Sadiq Khan, he will also come out with evidence that you are killing babies because you are breathing and your carbon is killing them. Unless, of course, you pay, then it's perfectly okay then. Raina wants ULEZ in every city. Yes, but that's not all she wants in every city. She wants to send us all a little prezi every city. Now, I think that the first place she should start is in the street where Gary Lineker lives. That would be a very, very good start. Do you think that will happen? Glasgow had 3 ballot papers taken by police. Do you know what happened? No, I actually don't know what happened there. Glasgow. But I will look it up, actually, now that you mentioned it. Take a note, I forget. They cannot carve the country up to advantage anymore, so they control the vote. The country gets ever closer. Third world, yes, ever closer to a dystopian society. That is why we must keep the fight. And as I said before the election, no matter what happens from today, it is day one. I was quite happy to have had, to have had quite a few votes. Certainly wasn't enough for me to win, but then think about it. My opponent was a Labour candidate who's been canvassing Northampton with a massive team and a massive budget for 18 months. And up until the election was called, they can spend as much as they want. Once the election is called, they were limited, but that limit has been raised, and it's quite a lot of money, much, much more than any individual would spend, or the average individual would spend, especially if you're funding your campaign alone, as I did, or many of us. But it doesn't matter. Now I continue the fight. I continue the fight as a parish councillor here in Northampton. I will continue to discuss current affairs with you. I will highlight issues in and around Northampton, either that I am aware of or that you bring to my attention. I would like to discuss them with you, take your advice on them, and I still want to champion the issues that bother me, which is homelessness, which is the grooming of children, domestic abuse, NHS, education, re-education, and the manner in which people can access education. That is the really important one, because there are many people out there who are maybe on national minimum pay or not far off it, who'd like to train for something else, but they just don't know what is actually available to them. And they need a system that is simplified so that they can sort the wheat from the chaff, so that they know that this course has academic value and it's not one of the ones that is just passed off as CPD, continuous professional development. because that has absolutely no academic value whatsoever. It is just box ticking by companies. They send you out on a CPD course for management or whatever, and you have a few speeches, take a few notes, look at a few charts, play a game together, and then everybody passes and everybody cheers and you get a certificate, but it doesn't mean a thing. It's worthless. That is wrong. Anything that has no academic value should make it clear this course or these courses do not have any academic value whatsoever, because there are many courses that people can take out there that are a day or two, a week or two, a month or two, that don't necessarily have to cost the earth, but they can take uh, your hourly rate up by 20, 30, 40, 50% or more. That is huge for somebody who's on national minimum pay. And as I've said, it's good for everybody to have a spell on national minimum pay as a student, to work in a restaurant, a fast food chain, or whatever, keep you grounded, help you to appreciate money and how hard it is to come by. But if people are on national minimum pay after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, somewhere we've failed them. That's how I see it. Anthony, do you think he'll take us back into the EU? I really don't know how this is going to work, because this is just going to be a straight irony now. We'll see what happens on Sunday in France with Marine Le Pen. Unless, of course, Macron does manage to make a deal with the devil and keep her out. I don't know, because I don't really completely understand the French electoral system. I've never taken the time to really look into it. But let's just say that they do win. Whether they do or don't, or rather whether she does or not win, I have a feeling that she will, but who knows? It's clear that most of Europe has moved sharply to the right. Is Keir Starmer and his cronies going to be happy about getting closer with countries that are very right-wing, far right than, or rather, wrong word, much more right-wing than any party we have in the UK? I don't know how that will actually work, to be honest. It's a difficult one. I don't think it's about him taking us back into the EU per se at this point. He knows that would be his downfall, but that doesn't stop him making concessions to the EU. And the worrying one is to sign up to the European Defence Force, because the last two wars, there have been others, have been caused by treaties with European nations. In particular, World War II was caused because when Germany invaded Poland, they were not aware that we had a treaty with Poland going back to the 1880s, I believe. So we were obliged to enter the war. Chamberlain was doing his utmost to keep us out of the war. And even after the war began, Chamberlain and the treacherous Lord, forgotten his name now, were doing their utmost to try and undermine Churchill to get him to just negotiate terms and keep peace. There could be an argument that we should have no treaties and literally just be a defence-only nation. We will not go out and involve ourselves in a war for anyone, but you mess with us, we'll be Switzerland. You will regret it. I think that the European Defence Force will be catastrophic, keeping in mind that just last week, the EU, in their desperation to expand, have begun accession talks with Moldova and Ukraine. How's that going to work? Very, very dangerous. And that's just one of many things. He cannot make a decision on anything. We don't know where he stands on anything at all. He is incapable of formulating a proper, coherent response to anything when he's put on the spot. He is basically very dangerous, and he is going to put our country at risk from all different dangers. And you may or may not be aware that just over the channel there are thousands of migrants cheering, uh, who were cheering rather, when the election result was finally called. So expect the numbers coming over to just go through the roof. Let's see what he's going to do about it. Yes. It's paper thin. Yes. Big majority can be a curse. Idle hands. Yeah, absolutely. I believe that he will have a civil war on his hands. He will have the left, nicknamed Corbynistas, versus the Blairites. Him in the middle can't make a decision. At the weekend, he's not working anyway. He is off. And even his deputy leader, Angela Rayner, I believe will probably put him across her knee and he'll just do as he's told. They have no money to deliver. No, they don't. So they're going to try and take it from somewhere, and they're desperate to plunder people's equity. How are they going to go about it? Let's wait and see. So the left wing won't be happy. I don't think so. I think that we're in quite a dangerous climate. Personally, I don't think that they will last the 5 years. There was no excitement whatsoever last night. Zero. Apart from a few members or part of, a few people who were part of the relevant Labour candidates team who'd been out canvassing for them, supporting them, etc. Yes, they would cheer. There was no sense of excitement. I have never ever picked up on such a feeling of apprehension, tension, worry, fear, trepidation. Choose your words, all meaning the same thing, just degrees of fear at the prospect of Keir Starmer with such a large majority that he really does not deserve. But I don't think that they will last the full 5 years, because they have no effective plan to deal with everything that they plan to deal with. And it's only going to be a matter of time, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, when people begin to see that actually we're paying out more and more and more, but these people are doing nothing at all. So it won't be long, and the people defecting will start. People resigning, stepping down, losing the whip because they're fighting against what the party is trying to do, and I think that it's possible that we will be having another general election a lot sooner than we think. And at the next general election, if the opposition has its act together, Labour will have an election night next time, which will be exactly the same, if not worse, as Conservatives' election night last night. Because many of the seats that Labour did win, they won with a small majority, and they will lose that majority in no time. In no time. So I could see 100 seats that they could lose just with a small number of people thinking to themselves, I voted for them because I didn't want to vote Conservative, and I'm not doing that again. And that's it. And the seats will fall one after another. The problem is it's got to get worse before it gets better. It just depends how much worse it's actually going to get. Starmer won't last long. He will be pushed out to make way for Khan. Mark my words, Blair and Brown and the WEF are pulling the strings. You may be absolutely correct, my friend. That concerns me and most people even more. Rayner wants to put immigrants in every borough. Yes, like I said, she has a little prezi for every one of us. They're going to be distributed evenly. Every migrant that's here will probably be given amnesty. Any more that come over will also be given amnesty. They won't stop illegal migration. What they will do is legalize it. So they won't be coming over on dinghies, they'll be coming over on the ferry. And what else do they have in mind to do? Do they have their eyes cast on those who have large homes, those who have space to accommodate guests, or space for families should they be encouraged, have their arms twisted to move out? Will they use the council tax as a way to make people find their homes unaffordable, because the council tax will be their new mortgage, even if they've paid their mortgage off, which will again give pressure to those who have larger homes to move out. And then they'll move families in, but those families won't pay the full rate of council tax because they'll get benefits and they'll get rebates and they'll be paying next to nothing. So it's a way of targeting one part of the community and punishing them in order to actually benefit another part of our new community. Jason, so they get votes consistently to try to get voted in every time, no doubt. Yes, absolutely. Labour has been indirectly importing votes for years, since the Blair years. We were doing fine as a country up until 1997. Unfortunately, in 1997, people have had enough of many years of Conservatives, but our debt was low. We had come out of the terrible recession of the early 90s. Our immigration was controlled. We had lots of things under control, and the country was in a very, very good position. And that was down to the prudence of the John Major administration, who took over, from the end of '89. But he didn't really get any credit for it. Tony Blair stepped in and he rode the wave of success that was actually put there by the Tories before him. And he rode that all the way through to the financial crisis. And once they had drained every bank account, they had squeezed every lemon dry, they basically left the country for the Conservatives to take over, effectively bankrupt, and start again. Unfortunately, the Conservative that entered number 10 when the Conservatives won again was Dave Cameron. Dave Cameron is not and never has been a Conservative. He is just a treacherous globalist, followed by Theresa May, who is even more treacherous, followed by Boris Johnson, who has showed himself to be the most dishonest, gutless, treasonous fake in our political history. And if you saw him when he made his feeble attempt to speak up for the Conservatives a few nights ago, looking as dishevelled as ever, pink from probably downing too much alcohol. His face was like I would imagine if he undressed, he would look like a swan match, albeit anyway, swan match. I won't get into that. The shine has gone. People have seen through him, and people have absolutely no respect for him. He had the keys to such a prosperous nation in 2019. He had a majority. He had the freedom to implement Brexit properly. He could have used our fishing to ensure that the French behaved, because legally there was nothing they could do if we did not want their boats in our waters fishing. And he should have used that as leverage to ensure that they didn't cause us any problems in Dover, Calais, in our ferries, our shipping, and also to control migrants. If the French knew that they would be punished by losing their fishing rights if they did not control the boats, I don't think a single boat would make it across the water. But basically, he sold us out. He signed the net zero agreement. He oversaw the wealth tax commission being put into place, sat there ready for any government to reach out to in the future and use as an excuse. I hope it won't be this one, to impose a one-off wealth tax on people's equity, because the idea is to plunder the equity of the over 60s. Somebody's going to try and do it sooner or later. That is immoral on every level. There is nothing that Boris Johnson can hold his hand up to and say, I did something good for this country. He didn't. He just served himself at our expense. Starr will make it easier for a future government to rejoin the EU. Not sure he will actually rejoin, but he can do a rejoin by the back door. Yes, it will be further integration by stealth. That's what he will do. One thing at a time, and we will, in reality, be tied to so many different laws within the EU without actually being an EU member. And that will be very, very damaging. And I hope that the people do see it. I'm disappointed that so many people actually put their faith in this administration. And as I said, it's going to be catastrophic when we have a government who has people who despise our own flag, despise our culture, don't know what a woman is, actively intend to overpopulate our country at the expense, both financially, logistically, morally, culturally, criminally, in every way, of the people who live here, then I believe that they really don't have the right to be in government. Make pensions means tested. There's one for discussion. Heat pumps are rubbish. I have made videos about heat pumps on my property channel last year, I think, and it was quite interesting, the hostility that I got from those who actually fit them. And it was always people with no name, no photo, who were literally being very, very hostile. And as I do, every one of them, I offered them the opportunity to join me live and state their case. Because if I'm missing something, let's discuss it. Show yourself. Tell people why you think that I am any number of derogatory terms that they've used for saying that I don't like them, and argue your case. Surprisingly, none of them accepted. I don't know why. The money or lack of it is concerning reform. Had the best idea with the 20,000. People would have had more to spend, which would get the economy off its butt, and the likes of VAT would feed back in. Absolutely. Think about it. Which is the party, which are the policies rather, that would help the poorest few million people? The party that will be intent on green levies, on more ULEZ expansion, God knows how many different taxes, or the party that will raise your tax-free allowance to £20,000 per year, the party that will remove green levies from your energy bill, will remove levies that add 20p per litre to your petrol and diesel, the party that will offer opportunity, the party that will remove interest on student loans, the party that offers those who work in medicine, doctors and nurses, the wonderful opportunity to serve in the NHS for 10 years after qualifying and then, as a reward, have their student loans wiped out. The party that would like to raise the cap imposed by the British Medical Association that keeps the number of doctors coming into medicine to 7,500. This lot claim that they are going to generate 40,000 appointments per week by paying medical staff to work evening. 40,000 per week, that's 2 million a year. Who's going to cover these appointments? Because the medical staff can't do more hours than they are doing because they are working to their maximum capacity as it is. Most are at breaking point. The NHS is not reliant on more money because the more you throw at it, it always gets swallowed up. And the budget for the NHS has increased significantly, but it is about working conditions. It is about staff retention. So one of the policies is that doctors and nurses in the NHS, or was it just nurses possibly, I need to double check that, would not pay income tax on their basic rate of salary for 3 years, which would inspire them, which would inspire those who have left to come back into the NHS. Every nurse we get back, permanent nurse we get back, is one less agency nurse, which will save thousands. One agency nurse, the cost of one agency nurse is more than the tax, or the tax that is given away in the tax break for several nurses. So in fact, every time a nurse comes back to the NHS and allows the NHS to reduce their agency staff by one nurse, for example, it actually covers the cost for several more nurses. And that's before we start on doctors. As I've said before, I was horrified to find out that a locum doctor can be paid thousands and thousands of pounds, like 4, 5, 6,000 pounds for half a day. Then we have all of the non-medical consultants who are fleecing the NHS. There we have jobs in the NHS like diversity officer, advertised at between 140 and 170,000 pounds per year. This is where all the money goes. So is the party that is addressing all of these the party that is going to help the poorest people or the working people? Keep in mind, Keir Starmer doesn't know what a working person is, or not. Because if you watch the video when Keir Starmer was asked, I think it was on LBC, what is working class? He did not know how to answer. I really don't think the man understands the concept of people who think, I've got a council tax bill to pay, but I need to top up my electricity. Now, if I top up my electricity, the council tax will either impose a charge on my council tax, or worse still, they will then remove my right to pay monthly, and then they will be demanding the entire year from me, plus legal costs, and then I will have a CCJ and further costs. These are decisions that many working class people have to make in this day and age. He has no clue, absolutely no clue. And with regards to council tax, I don't think they should be allowed to demand the whole year from you. I don't think that they should be able to demand 1 year's worth of council tax from you in 10 months. And I do think that they should offer people the opportunity to be able to pay weekly, because some people can only manage to pay a week at a time at best. That is understanding and trying to facilitate people who are working class and who are struggling. You don't help working class people by giving Ed Miliband a free hand to impose yet more green levies, so that in a few months' time when it gets cold, they will have to make a choice. Am I going to eat, or am I going to keep warm? That's not how people should live in modern Britain. What else have we got here? Start of reform journey. Let's get after Labour. You got my vote yesterday. Thank you very, very much. It was such a privilege. It was emotional, actually. It has been a journey. The amount of messages that I have had, calls, emails, people that I've met out and about. And I did promise that from Friday, I either continue the fight as a member of parliament or I continue the fight as a local parish councillor. I know I don't have I don't have a lot of clout, but I can still fight for the things that I believe in. I can still bring them to your attention, what's going on in and around Northampton. I can highlight issues, and I can, not only that, I can be a voice. I intend to be a voice, and I will still continue to pursue change here in Northampton, starting off with homelessness, education, and safety for children, and from grooming, and all of these things that do mean a lot to me. And in that regard, then I would request your kind indulgence. It's not about supporting me to ask anything from you, but your advice, your suggestions, your ideas. Perhaps we can have meetings to discuss certain things so that I can perhaps put together a pathway to actually make something happen locally with your help. That would be great, because if it's just me, one voice, then effectively all I am is just a lone troublemaker. I'm quite happy to be the troublemaker. That's why I'm here, to rock the boat. Somebody's got to do it. But I would like to actually make things happen. They don't have to be major battles. I don't need to negotiate world peace. I'd just like to ensure that I do something so that nobody has to sleep on the streets if they don't want to. I know that there are situations where people have been taken in and given alternatives and they end up back on the streets, and I don't understand all of that. I don't understand their chain of thought, which is why I want to speak to people who work with the homeless. I want to create awareness. I want to create support, and I want to create a fight, because it is morally obscene that there are thousands and thousands of square feet of empty properties, residential, commercial, etc. I would rather see a row of bunk beds in a warehouse with a gas fan heater for people to sleep than to see them sleeping on the streets. Nobody should sleep on the streets. So in that regard, the fight continues. I do think ballot harvesting occurs. Nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me. EU Defence Force, that terrifies me, I'm afraid. And that could drag us into another war. And we really, really don't want or need that. Is enough. Too many people coming to work in this country and sending it abroad instead of spending it here. More money going out than staying in. Birmingham is lost. I do understand that. The EU Defence Force is fine, but just who is going to command it? Well, the EU, of course. The UK is the only one who has won anything several centuries, but would they hand us the reins? I think not. My dear Paolo, with regards to the French, are you aware when the last time we got our own way with the French was? It was the Battle of Waterloo. Never had our own way with them ever since. Ironically, probably Germany. Reform is gathering momentum. You got my vote yesterday. By 2029, we could be in a strong position. Thank you very, very much, Adam. It was a privilege. It's not something I took lightly. And it's what started off last year when I was just going to stand by myself, just to raise a voice of anger against the establishment. And then gradually, as I saw Reform's policies and I agreed with them, I gradually joined Reform. And then as people began to get in touch, my initial reasons for standing remained, but they were not the priority anymore. The priority were overtaken by the people out there who are angry, disillusioned, in despair, struggling, looking to me to fight their corner from them. And I'm very sad that I can't fight your corner in Westminster, but I can still fight it to the best of my ability, one way or another. I hope the assault on farms won't continue. So do I. It is really worrying me, and it is not being discussed enough. Yes, we see the memes on Facebook with the tractor, no farmers, no food, but we just see them, put little heart and move on. What are we doing to protect our farming, our food, our source of life? Because if we're not careful, we are going to give some very, very nasty people the power to dictate whether we can eat or not. If we do not behave, we won't be able to eat. If we say the wrong things, our bank account will be closed. If we say the wrong thing, the thought police will have us in prison in no time. This is the society that we're heading towards, and we need to stop it, because we don't have that long left before we won't be able to, because we won't be able to speak up against it legally. That's not me being a conspiracy theorist. It is reality, I'm afraid. I think last I read, we grew up as much or more, according to the Doomsday Book, back then as we do now. So, given the population now, we are miles and miles behind. As I said, we grow less than 50%, and that's falling because the population is rising and the output of food produced in this country is falling. Where will it end? Keep the regular contact with the locals. The next time around, they know you better than your current MP and may be more likely to vote for you. I completely agree. I intend to do that. Even if I can't go live every night, I will go live frequently to discuss current affairs, local issues. I can think of a few. I will do some research, bring them to your attention. I want to meet people who can help me with the issues that I have mentioned. I can arrange, if anybody is interested, I'm happy to occasionally arrange small meetings to meet you and maybe put an action plan in place, because I want to actually start trying to do something about this. And as I said, it's not something I can do alone. And yes, of course, already it's incredible the amount of people um, um, who I've actually become known to. Doesn't mean that everyone's voted for me, but a few weeks ago, there are many people out there who are not particularly interested in politics, who wouldn't even know who Reform are, let alone what they stand for. I've had such limited time to get this out there, but now I don't. Now I am getting at the message out, and I agree. Over time, I'm hoping that the people of Northampton will become much more aware, and the fight will be. I want to fight the battle now. Uh, we will know on the 7th about France. Yes, we will. I bet the EU is watching the French elections a lot closer than we are. I would imagine that they probably are. They are petrified with everything that's going on. Even 4 or 5 Reform candidates in Westminster has terrified them. Look at the campaign they have had against us collectively and individually. That is the actions of people who are in perpetual fear. The same goes with the EU, because the show could be over. Starmer is a flip-flopping flip-flopper. Couldn't have put it better myself. I sincerely hope not. Will they still support Ukraine militarily? I don't know what's going to happen there. I really, really don't. There's been a lot that has happened with Ukraine, and there's a lot at play. And I think that warrants an entire discussion in its own right, because there are some facts that I could bring to your attention that are relevant, but it does concern me. And what concerns me even more is, why on earth are the EU desperate to begin accession talks with Moldova and Ukraine now? The two two of the most corrupt nations in Europe, and they want to bring them into the EU. They will not be net contributors, they will be a net loss. Who is going to pay for them as well? Or is it more about the EU trying to corner control of the grain in Ukraine? That's not meant to be a rhyme. However, I don't know what the situation is now, but I've just remembered a few years ago, Ukraine had signed a deal with China for hundreds of thousands of acres of its land to be used to grow grain specifically for China. I don't know what that situation is at the moment. I'd have to look into it. If any of you know or see anything, I'd be very grateful if you'd let me know, because I've just thought of that. Now, that could also multiply the risk factor of all of this exponentially. Because they have no funds, they will try and pacify the left by bringing in Sharia, blasphemy laws, and woke laws, and maybe go after the right to play the gallery. They will do anything. They will simply do anything. Love seeing Nigel deal with the heckling in Westminster today. Yes, it was quite good, wasn't it? And then it was funny how they just announced, "Oh, there's another one. There's me." Yes, try and distract the left that way. The left is very difficult because the left don't debate. The left only hate. Full stop. When they do not get the response that they want, i.e., you just agree with their illogical nonsense, all they do is abuse you. That is how you know that a lefty has lost the argument. They will use their catch-all words to try and shut you down. Racism, xenophobe, Islamophobe, whatever it may be. If you hear any of these words, welcome them, because it is an open confession by somebody who is disturbed that they have lost the argument. Don't retaliate. Don't get angry. Consider it an admission of defeat. Say thank you, walk away. Don't waste your time, because you're just banging your head against a brick wall. People will be braver to vote reform next time. As I said, we had very little time, which is the very reason that that Sunak called the election so quickly. But it backfired. It backfired on everybody in the end, I'm afraid. What was this one? ULEZ would cause loss of seats for Labour. Well, they still expanded it throughout London, and I can see it expanding further and further out. And what they will do is anybody who objects to it, Ed Miliband will be online, on video, calling them climate deniers, climate delayers. And as they always do, they will simply respond to it by name calling. And there will be people out there who will then join in the narrative. And anybody who dares to say, I can't afford to pay ULEZ, will not receive any sympathy. They'll receive abuse. This is how it works. Boris Johnson has an interesting family. Extended family, that's for sure. Yes. I warned people about Boris, even though I voted for him, that he was a poison chalice and got vilified for it. Yes. I'm afraid he was much, much worse than we expected. But I think people have seen through that now. I thought Boris would be good. We fell for his blithering act, but in reality, it was just a show, wasn't it? Paolo, I trusted Boris like many others. Big mistake. Yes, but we're paying for that mistake, and we're going to pay for it even more over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years than we have in the past 2 or 3 years, because now we have a bunch of people who hate this country, hate our flag, hate our culture, hate our heritage, and they will do everything to destroy it. I voted for him to get some sort of Brexit done, which he did. It just wasn't a good sort of Brexit. Not at all. Boris Johnson's dad is a dangerous man. Paolo, every Brexiteer did that. The only reason he got his majority. Absolutely. And he had a once in a lifetime opportunity where the Red Wall went against everything they believed in and voted Conservative. That might never happen again because they believed that we would have Brexit and that we would regain control of our country. And all he did was hand over control of our country to the WEF and the WHO and the UN. And in the background, we have the ECHR dictating to us. And I know all the arguments with regards to staying in the ECHR. I want out today, immediately. Voted for you yesterday. Britain needs reform. Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. I completely agree. Labour are the party of the sneering classes, champagne socialists. Labour will be ruled by the Islamists. PM question times will be interesting to watch. Yes, it will be very, very interesting to see what will happen and to see how they handle being held to account by by the Gang of Five. If Labour are really about the poor, they should get rid of homelessness in one day. Do you think they will? I'm more than happy to talk to you about my experience with NHS in Northampton and 1 year and half battle. Adam, that would be lovely. Perhaps, are you in town? Are you local? Whereabouts are you? Perhaps you could PM me and tell you where my favourite place is. It's the Bradlaugh. It's nice and it's safe and it's beautiful. And there's always somewhere nice to sit to have a chat and have a meeting. Perhaps we could meet there, have a coffee, and you could give me some an update and maybe even some suggestions and advice. That would be most welcome so that I can see if there's anything I can do or what I can do. We were caught between a rock and a hard place with Boris. He was the only chance to actually see democracy working. We got the cake. It just wasn't the birthday cake we was expecting or wanting. Yes, absolutely. We should all grow fruit and veg at home too. It's increasingly more difficult to do that. Newer houses have smaller and smaller gardens. It's very, very difficult. But it can be done. But control of our food is being taken away from us. And that's really worrying. EU expansion, isn't it just? Look who Zelensky's uncle is, Soros. Well, I have my thoughts about Zelensky and the entire episode and the fact that Boris went over and scuppered a peace deal in 2022, which I do want to look into more. Again, any info on that, most welcome. Bit like those who questioned the medical procedure during lockdown. Oh, yes. The anti-vaxxers, those horrible people. I believe they even got a mention in EastEnders, didn't they? The anti-vaxxers. And what's his name? The chief scientific advisor. I've forgotten his name now. He's been given a high-ranking job with the Labour Party. Isn't that a surprise? Starmer has already done a deal with Khan. It wouldn't surprise me. So ultimately, we do have a lot to worry about. The implications of what happened yesterday are far-reaching. It's really bad that the Labour Party were able to get such a huge majority on such a small share of the vote. We need to attack this head on. We need to jump on them for anything that they do. We cannot be bullied into silence, and have no doubt that their disciples, the Don't Debate, Only Hate Brigade, will condemn you for any questioning anything that this lot do. But it is your job, it is the obligation of every citizen to question everything they do, to call everything that they do, to call it out, to not capitulate, to keep up the fight. It's not about me. It's not about a party. It is about our country. It is about our freedom. It doesn't matter if we disagree. We should disagree. That is what democracy should be. There's nothing that I would like more than to see proper debates with people being civilized, expressing different opinions about how to solve different problems, not these embarrassing school playground squabbles we have seen on the TV in these so-called debates. We have not had a single proper debate, because a proper debate would not be a staged guests, a staged audience, and 4 or 5 staged questions where the guests effectively just respond with a one-liner each, and maybe they get another round of one-liners and then they move on to the next question. No, a debate would be an hour or two discussing the NHS, an hour or two discussing education, homelessness, etc., etc., conducted properly without people squabbling over all over each other. It's atrocious, it's embarrassing, and it is not a debate. The media have not been interested in pursuing answers for issues. They have been more concerned about who they can fire shots across their bow at. Who we got now? Pure Valence. Yes, that's the one. That is the one. Yeah. What's this one? I would have gone to the camps during lockdown if I had to. No government was going to tell me what to do with my body. Fair play. Fair play to you. Beat me to it, Jason. Yes, I have some rebels here. The kind of people that we're going to need. You had the right to refuse the vaccine. It wasn't mandatory. Patrick Valance. Yes, I'm still talking. I will need to finish soon before my throat goes dry. Starmer said Britain first, not British people first. Big difference. I'm worried about gender lobby getting to children. They are getting to children. And again, we need to stop this. We need to attack this head on, because this is going to get worse. We have a prime minister who doesn't know what a woman is. Not that Penny Mordaunt was any better, because she was just as bad. Now, he did try to change his tune a couple of weeks ago because Uncle Blair had a word with him and put him on the naughty step and told him, now you need to stop this. But this is somebody who literally does not have a decisive bone in his body. If you saw him in the debate with Rishi, I'm sure that Rishi must have downed 2-3 Red Bulls before that debate, because he was like a jackhammer that with a broken control on it, because he just wouldn't stop. But he did fire some valid points, and all Starmer did was just stand there and look like a rabbit in the headlights. He had not put a single coherent response together. And when he said that he would deport illegal immigrants back to where they came from, only to be informed by Fishy Rishi, that what is he going to do? Go and sit down and have a meeting with the Ayatollahs or with the Taliban? Then again, no answer from him. No answers whatsoever. Now, people think that he must be smart because he was a prosecutor. A prosecutor doesn't need to be smart. A prosecutor just presents and regurgitates what's there, take notes and regurgitates. A prosecutor doesn't need to have answers. A prime minister does. They used threats to make it sound like a jab was mandatory. I know many who took it because they were compelled to. Yes, and if you needed to travel, it became a nightmare. Care workers lost their jobs. Now, what happened to those care workers who did lose their jobs? How did that work afterwards? Was there any recompense for what happened to them? I think it's more a case of shamed or bullied by some medics to vulnerable people. Yes, because you see, the most common answer we have is, "Are you a scientist?" Well, you need to listen to the science. You need to follow the science. How many times do we hear that? But what they don't tell you is that any scientist who actually contradicts the narrative that the other scientists are peddling is shut down, cancelled, out the way. So, of course, they will tell you to listen to the science because you're listening to their pre approved, government approved scientists. And many of these scientists should be ashamed of themselves because they are men of physics, men of science, women of science as well, people of science, I'm sorry. And they're not focusing on science, they are focusing on politics, and that is wrong. The weak leader, you have no idea how weak he will be. The headlines during lockdown mentioned how the unjabbed should be refused treatment or unable to travel and other threats. Blair said some awful things. There was another leader who was advocating passports for those with who had been vaccinated, and there were hints at no passports for those who were unvaccinated. Do you see where they were going with this? Starmer will do what Angela's remote control makes him do. Yes, I wonder how she does manipulate him. Do you think she has some sort of special trick that she does to get him to capitulate to her demands? Nigel Farage will eat Starmer. Ooh. The road ahead might be rough, but there is going to be some fun along the way. That is for sure. Oh, absolutely, yes. In a few weeks' time, Starmer will be told, after the election, you were laughing, but you're not laughing now. And what are you laughing at, Jay? Thalidomide in the 1960s, yes, you were called a bad parent by doctors, politicians, media, and scientists if you didn't take it. History does repeat itself. NHS spent billions on health passports not used. They were all geared up to implement health passports. I'm afraid so. And so, on this note, I shall call it a night in a minute. I would like to, before I finish, express my thanks to everyone who supported my campaign, everyone who voted for me, everyone who took an interest, regardless of who you voted. It is the taking part that is important. Again and again and again, I cannot reiterate enough. My primary concern is democracy, and that democracy can be done. I would love to be able to participate in debates about important issues with people who disagree with me, who know better than myself, with an audience to ask questions so that we could have a constructive outcome, so that we could learn, so that we could find answers, solutions, and a way forward. How wonderful would that be, rather than this name calling and mudslinging and just grandstanding for political purposes, which is not just embarrassing, it is also completely ineffective, and it achieves nothing. Yes, my sister's baby in the womb. I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you very, very much. I really enjoyed it. I even enjoyed it after they'd slung some mud at me once I had my say, and I made it clear that I had done nothing wrong. And in fact, one or two of them even took their articles down. So that was a win for me, not being bullied. Uh, Thank you and good night. And thank you for joining me. Good night to you too. Um, Onwards and upwards, ignoring the naysayers. Absolutely, nobody's stopping us. I'll be back probably tomorrow. I'll think of another topic. I'll do some research on these topics that we discussed, especially about PR, and I'll try and put a presentation together. Although that may take me a few days, so that we are all completely clear exactly how it works, so that we can all actively campaign for it. And on that note, thank you very, very much, everyone. And here's a quick tour. I'll leave you with a quick tour of Northampton, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye for now. Bye.